All right, the recording is started. So this is the July 31st, 2018 Rook Community Meeting. And let's go ahead and get started with our agenda. So I think the first thing that we want to talk about today is a 0.8.1 patch release.
Yes.
So we look at the project board and we have a number of things in review. And because they are on the 0.8 project board, we expect all of these to be backported, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. So I know it needs backport. Is that a new label that we've defined recently?
Uh, I'm not sure where that came from, but it's a good thing. That's on a PR. Maybe Alex just added it to his
Yeah,
thing.
I guess that must be a new thing that he created. Yeah, we have not been using that in the past, nor are we using it now consistently. So maybe we can have a little discussion about that. But let's talk about the issues that we have here to finish off and get a 0.8.1 release out. Oh, my dog's choking on something over here. Sorry. Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about 1919 then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one. So thanks for the feedback last night. Just making a few changes based on that, and then that should be in and hopefully backported before long here in the next few hours. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else open there. It just needs a lot of testing every time I touch it, as far as upgrades and um, anyway, starting the OSDs reliably.
Is there integration testing that's specific new integration testing that would need to be added for this, or the scenarios we have of starting a cluster? I remember in the recent past we had OSD restart was a desire to have an integration test. Did that make it in?
An OSD restart? I don't believe so, or I don't recall.
Yeah, that was an effort that you had started. I thought you had written a whole integration test for that, but you were waiting on Wyman to get the one OSD per pod changes
Oh wait.
in.
Oh yeah, that one. You remember better than me.
I didn't even write that
That
code.
that commit did go in with the one OSD per pod. So yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
right. We
So we have a specific
started.
integration test for that.
Yes.
Oh,
So
good.
um,
So that's
yeah,
really
we
good
don't.
too for the relative to this specific set of changes here about adding the init container and writing the ceph config during the pod restart or pod start anytime it starts, right?
Yes.
So that's good. So we're getting some coverage or exercising that path.
Yeah. The one integration test that's missing that I think will wait for a full upgrade integration test is, yeah, the upgrading now is supported for the OSDs automatically if there's a change to the OSD pod spec. And yeah, that's still a manual test.
Right. Yeah, we do not have an integration test for upgrading across versions, and I did not expect us to right now. I am happy with the progress that our upgrade support has been making so far. We have continued to make strides towards a fully automated solution, so that's good progress. Um, what was the point I was going to make here? Oh, so the question I had is, so you're saying that for any change to any of the nodes, like any properties of the storage nodes in the cluster CRD, that will trigger, like that will be a supported update from the operation from the operator?
Well, I haven't fully, I guess, tested a bunch of scenarios, but it seems like if anything under the nodes element in the CRD changes, it seems like it triggers the orchestration, which then would uh, update the OSDs in this case if they change. Um, I believe that's the behavior. I need to double check, but
Yeah.
I have seen the orchestration kicked off when I didn't expect it. Um, and I think it's after I looked at that function you referenced, with it uses the deep copy, which or deep compare, deep equal. That's what it is, deep equal. And I believe that looks at the object um, and all its subproperties.
Interesting. Yeah, I had thought fairly confidently that the only time an orchestration would get kicked off there was if the set of nodes changed. A node was added or removed. So that's interesting to learn that here. Do you have any concerns then about deployments being updated too frequently, or when we don't want that behavior to happen, or because of the Kubernetes behavior of only really kind of updating the deployment object when something's actually changed, in the Kubernetes API, that's not a concern.
Um, I I think it's not a concern. I think initially when doing this automatic upgrade, I was thinking, well, let's only do this specific version if it's from 0.80, just to make sure we're not too aggressive. But after our discussion, I feel better about, yes, because Kubernetes doesn't upgrade the pod spec unless it actually changed. It won't get restarted too often. And updating the CRD is not a common operation, really. It's only if the user's trying to do something, in which case he probably wants to kick off the orchestration. And it's the same behavior as if he restarted the operator.
Right.
So either one, so I don't feel concerned about kicking it off too aggressively.
I don't particularly think I do either, with the observations that we've made from this week with testing and trying it out. I do. So that's kind of another example, though, of we've made strides or progress towards automatic upgrades. We've also made strides and progress along the way here with supporting dynamic cluster updates too. Right, when properties change, the operator makes that desired state a reality. So we've made progress on both of those endeavors, even though neither one is officially supported.
Right.
So that's good.
Somewhat supported, or quite supported, really.
Quite supported. So you will be able to finish off your testing and get the pull request for this merge today, you think?
Yeah, I don't feel like anything is big.
Right. Okay. How about is this also covered in that same pull request, 1945?
1945.
I think that 1945, I believe, is your pull request for the CFFO config.
Yeah, 1945. It covers those. Let's see, 19.
Yeah, 1945. That's right.
45. Yep, that's my pull request. Are you sharing your screen, or?
Oh no, I'm not. I don't think I am.
I don't see it.
Oh, it took 10 minutes for us to figure that out.
All right. I was looking at my own board.
Sorry, folks. Hey, Alexander.
There's Alex.
Yeah, so I was pointing at this here and moving my mouse around, gesturing thusly, and not showing that to anybody. So yeah, so this issue here is in the same 1945 pull request.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So both of these are covered here. And then this is also in review about improving the flex volume documentation. And I saw some back and forth from you and from Travis and Alexander on that. And then I want to take a quick look at this as well, Alexander, right after this meeting, I believe. And but it looked like it was a good change so far. So I don't think there's anything that we're worried much about here.
Well, one thing to mention is, as kind of everyone can see it, I added the label need spec part because that we don't lose track of things that need backbone.
Yeah, we noticed that I think before you joined today. So is the intent? So this is on a pull request. So do you think the pull request, like the label, should be on the pull request or on the issue itself?
The problem is there is no issue for the improved flex volume document satisfaction. It's just me, from a super question coming from Slack, where we need to improve it. And I can open an issue, but yeah.
Yeah, for simple changes, if we just have a PR, that seems good. But then we just put the PR in the board and tag it as needs backboard. But we could use the needs backboard on issues.
On issues, okay.
It's just in general the needs backboard is just a label. Let's put it wherever we want on it. At least that we don't lose it in the end.
And so is the intent
Okay.
then that we clear that label once the backport has been performed so that anytime we do a query for needs backport, we only are given the results set that still needs to be backported?
So yeah, we could do that.
If a ticket's closed, though, it can probably still have that tag, right? I think it'd be hard to track or make sure every ticket
Yeah,
has that cleared.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So closed would be another facet there that would make that query easier. Okay, Alex, your audio sounds similar to yesterday, where there's like a static
I don't know.
buzz. Oh, yeah. Oh, there it is again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whatever change you made yesterday in our conversation to rectify that may need to be done again. All right, so these other in progress tickets for 0.8.1, what is the status of these? I don't think I really recognize this one.
Yeah, 1921. Fabian, you're here?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Great.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
welcome.
can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you.
So do we already have a pull request open for this?
Yeah, so this one was weird. So on my installation of OpenShift that I was testing with, basically the issue I was seeing is the volumes were being mounted without the group set to the group in the security context and not group writable. So I submitted a PR to Chonet, but then I think rootfs pointed out that flex volumes do that already. The last, like if you like follow the code of flex volumes after it calls the actual device plugin, it chones and chmods the directory. So I was playing around with it a little bit more, and I found that on my system, if I set it to, I don't know if you probably are familiar since your project. There is like a mount device which mounts the volume to somewhere that Rook knows about, and then there's the mount command, which then bind mounts that directory to where Kubernetes expects it to be to mount it into the pod, or for the pod to look for it. If I do a chown and chmod on it in the mount device function, then the end permissions are what I expect. But if I do it in the mount one, where it's at, which is where it bind mounts it in, the permissions don't take effect. And obviously, because the flex volume is doing the chmod and chown after the mount is called, I assume that it's hitting the same thing on my system. But then rootfs spun up a local environment which did not reproduce this. So I've been trying to get, I was using OpenShift 3.9, his environment was 3.10. I've been trying to get a 3.10 cluster spun up to see if there's something weird there. But it makes literally no sense to me because I can do it from the CLI fine after the bind mount and the permissions take effect. And the go function is literally just doing syscalls. So I'm gonna see if it reproduces on my system when 3.10 is installed. But I am totally lost on like what the possible cause of that could be.
Yeah, and there was some difference in environment that you thought rootfs had. It was, I can't remember what it was.
It looked like his default security context wasn't restricted, and I think so. I think there may be some like admission controller plugins that weren't enabled or something. The cluster settings though didn't seem to match like the default installation. I'm not sure why that is either.
Yeah, so that could be a difference besides the 3.10.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, something around I can't think of the difference in the context between the mount path and the mount. Does the mount path happen inside the Flex driver or the? Yeah. It's all in the Flex driver.
Yeah, I think it does mount device and then it does mount. And you can change the permissions in mount device, and you can't change the permissions in mount.
So it's still a mystery. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like, it breaks my brain completely. It doesn't. I don't understand.
Could it be an issue of the, like, for whatever reason the flex volume isn't totally like provisioned yet? Like it's just a race condition kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely could be something like that, actually.
Like I don't know if there's
I'm not very familiar with file systems. It's sort of
yeah, I'm not sure if there's a check you could do to like see if the file system is ready, like to kind of wait on it for a little bit.
Yeah, because if the directory you're mounting it onto had the permissions set before the mount completed, it would probably clobber it, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That definitely could be it. So I don't know. Yeah, okay, definitely a place to explore. That would also explain why it reproduces in some environments and not others. I'm running in a virtual environment, so it's probably slower than his host.
And the place that rootfs pointed out that the Kubernetes already applies the chown is that happens after the mount, right?
Yep.
So it, yeah, I guess unless there's still a race condition there, it seems like it should be mounted at that point.
Yeah.
All right.
It's going really fast.
Yeah. So the only workaround for this right now is if you run a privileged container or without the or as PID 0 basically.
Yep. Yeah, but once we figure out what's going on, the PR should be fairly minimal. We just have to make sure just have to do whatever is required to make it so that the work that Kubernetes is doing actually works. But like so I don't know, waiting or I don't know. We can explore that, but ignore the pull request I have open right now. It's totally useless.
Okay.
I was just putting that up so I could share with rootfs.
And does this only affect OpenShift environments?
I'm not sure. If it's a race condition issue, then it probably would affect anything that has the security context enabled, I would imagine. If you have a security context that requires you to run as a specific user, and then you mount the things not group writable and not owned by group, then, or not with the proper group set, I imagine it would affect anything. I think there's probably not that many Kubernetes installations that have that stuff enabled at the moment, but I don't think there's anything like super specific to OpenShift that should cause it.
Are you sure that it's the run as user still? Because I think on a normal cluster I can, without a problem, set fs group, which I'm not sure if it works on block storage, but at least it's working on file system. So yeah, I think if you use run as user or something, you still need to manually set fs group. It's not like copied.
Well, I think sorry, what do you mean?
I mean, yeah. So sorry, back again. I mean, if you set in a security context run as user and set an ID, that won't cause Kubernetes to ch own the directory or anything. What causes the file system or whatever to be ch owned is if you set the fs group.
Okay, so maybe this is specific to OpenShift. OpenShift will automatically it'll add the FS group to the pod security context if no FS group is set. I don't know. That's part of like the defaulting. It's just sort of the default value will be set if you don't provide one.
Oh.
So that may be a difference then.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I think this one we need it in a 0.8 release, but while we're still investigating, I wonder if we'd need to go ahead with an 0.8.1 so we can get the other issues in, and then have an 0.8.2 potentially when we find this one, just to not block the rest.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Yeah, this is not like crazy high priority for me. I was just trying to get it working. but it can totally get pushed to 8.2.
Yeah, and we can monitor, how the other tickets and issues get wrapped up. If everything else is done and, backported to the 0.8 release branch, and this is the only thing that's not done, then, we'd go ahead with the release then.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Thanks for your efforts on this, Fabian. It sounds like it's, I hope you have some hair left after this.
Yeah, well, it's good. I've always wanted to learn more about how file systems work.
Nice. And then what I don't, I've seen some discussion on this issue as well recently. Now there's an outstanding PR for this too, correct?
So this one was,
holy cow, this is huge.
this one was merged, and
Oh, it merged? So
and I was thinking, Wallman opened a backport PR, but then this issue wasn't resolved, and I just noticed a minute before the meeting, and I didn't find if it was actually merged. So it's pretty much there. I'll follow up with him to make sure it is.
It currently seems to either just need a back.
No, I could do that too. Okay, cool. So you or Wyman will follow up on that then. And this definitely speaks to the value of putting all this information into a gist. I think because when you're trying to scroll and see, find information on a ticket when it's, this massive, becomes very difficult to find. The signal to noise ratio becomes pretty inappropriate.
If I remember it in some time, or we can just put it as an action task to action item to add, like to the issue templates, like if you have logs, please use gist or something.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea at all, Alex. I don't see this happening very often, though. It's just on this one, I started scrolling and then I continued.
Yeah, just in general, having the logs as a gist, or
Yeah.
If it's not too long, if it's like 5 lines of log, who cares? But if it's like already just a cluster YAML, it's like
that by itself. All right, and then this is the last ticket in the 0.8 board. Is Alex? You started an effort on this?
Yeah, could you scroll down? I like my last comment to be shown here. Thank you. I had some time on the weekend, and this is just kind of it should fix it. I hadn't really tested it yet. Just looking from the logic and everything, as I was in a train, so I didn't really had time to spin up my minikube. This should work and also be backwards compatible in the point that we just kind of create a new parameter which says this is the data pool. And if the data pool is, well, obviously set, then add this the -- data pool flag to the RBD create command. So it should be straightforward. So Travis already left some feedback. I'll look into it. I'm not sure when I have the time to add the feedback, but I'll look that it's done at latest next week or so.
It looked like it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. It's more documentation right now, and I think answering 1 or 2 questions you had, Travis. I'm not sure what the status there was.
Yeah, pretty much just questioning what the flow looks like or what's an example. It would just be helpful to see what it looks like now.
Yeah, as I think you wrote it in the description. I haven't updated the docs yet.
Yep.
So since we do have a pull request open for this should be in the in review column, correct?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Oh, and on 1925, I did find that was merged, so that ticket just needs to be closed again.
So that is in the 0.8 branch?
Yes.
There was a backport, you're saying?
Yeah, pull request 1956.
Okay, so that is closed and done, and I trust you, Travis. This time. All right, so that is everything from 0.8.1. I think we have discussed all the issues and we have a plan for all of them. So let's keep following up on the ones that are in review, get those all merged and backported, and then we will reconvene for making sure that we're ready for the release process with the release criteria that we've defined recently. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we have an item for the 0.9 themes and priorities later on, so let's skip this for now. And let's go ahead and go into the community topics now. So Alex, you had the first one here of which Kubernetes versions we support.
Yeah, so it's kind of simply the question on what Kubernetes version we support, because kind of what Basam said, if we support the versions that Client Go supports, and the problem with Client Go is that it's kind of supporting like every Kubernetes version except like 1 or 2. So I'm not sure if you want to do that.
I think, yeah, I think historically that was what we had started with, is maintaining the same compatibility matrix that Client Go does. But I think we have diverged from that, and we're not going to go back on that divergence. We are not going to re-implement third-party resources and stuff for Kubernetes 1.6 and previous. Yeah, we're definitely not going to do that. So does anybody know, do we have an official statement anywhere in our documentation or our README or anything that says what specific versions of Kubernetes we support?
Well, right now we say 1.7 and up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Correct. Yeah, I misspoke that question. What I meant to say was, do we have, does that declaration of supported Kubernetes versions mention anything about Client Go?
I don't think so.
Or has that been an informal,
No, I don't think so. I think it was just, from Basam coming that, hey, we want to support those versions.
Okay. So yeah, so I think then, so if our documentation says that we support 1.7 and newer, which is true, and we don't say anything about matching client.go formally, then I think we're probably good here, and we can just stop saying that we, in an informal context, that we support the same matrix, because we do not, and I don't think we should either.
Yeah, so it's simply the question, especially at the community here, what Kubernetes versions the people want to see supported, because I'm personally looking at it like it's Kubernetes 1.11, and maybe it's at most, like 1.9, 1.10, and 1.11, because we're kind of skipping looking at 0.8 now, kind of. We skip one version, 1.8 with that, but it's making it simpler when new features in Kubernetes get released, even as alpha or beta, which, for example, would improve Rook flow or something. It's kind of, I think, same with the validation of CRDs, which wasn't included, I think, in like 1.6, 1.7 or so.
Yeah. It feels like as we release and Kubernetes releases, we should kind of drop a previous version as we go and not support indefinitely. So, and at this point, if we, by the time we release 0.9, perhaps we can drop support for 1.7 and 8 and keep 1.9 and newer. That seems reasonable. I'm just don't have any hard data other than that it seems reasonable.
Didn't we had some data from the survey, Jared?
Yes, we did have data from that, and the clear understanding from that data was that nobody was on 1.6, nobody. So that's made it safer to go ahead and remove that support. I don't recall about 1.7, but I do believe though that most people are on 1.9 or newer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe putting it like that, but if most people, I'm not sure when the survey was from Kubernetes version, but let's say at the time of the survey, there was like 1.9 out. And if there are like, let's say 10% on 1.8 or something, or 1.7 then, and the rest is kind of on 1.8 and 1.9, there isn't like, I don't see a reason why somebody wouldn't keep the Kubernetes cluster up to date. And, with that, reducing their impact on issues and bugs, and for us, allowing them to, probably bring them some cool features thanks to Kubernetes updates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so here's the results of the survey that was back in, I think, April or so. So 1.11 was not even out then. But yeah, and so the number of 1.7 users was fairly small compared to, the bulk were on 1.9 and newer. So
It's
that
kind
is
of,
tends to be the trend.
yeah, that's kind of exactly what I try to say here, because it's always like the new version comes out, and it's kind of just perfectly the spectrum of new version came out, and it's perfectly in balance with those three versions I would propose to only support.
So for me, I don't know if that's. I wouldn't say that that's gonna a numerical range. I don't think it should be the policy that we set. I think it needs to be taken into account, what the specific features are and what the user needs are. But I think for sure the policy should be that when there's a new version released, we support it right away. We should not ever be behind Kubernetes released versions ever. So 1.11's out, and if we're not compatible with it, we need to fix that immediately. That type of thing, right? Then making decisions about what versions to drop needs to take into account, I believe, the reasons for why we would need to drop that. And that would probably be driven by specific features that are only available, that we're taking dependencies on, that are only available in newer versions of Kubernetes. And we need to be very careful about, when we take those dependencies on new features of Kubernetes, that results in dropping support for older versions. So I would not be comfortable with saying the latest 3 always. That does not make me comfortable. I think it needs to be on a more case-by-case basis, depending on what the features and dependencies are, if that makes sense.
Sure. Well, and maybe we could say as a general guideline or approach, the last 3, maybe 4, depending on features, maybe even 5, depending on what's going on. But yeah, I think in 0.9, shooting
that's
for
kind of like
1.9 or newer seems reasonable, though.
Yeah, that could be fair. But yeah, your progression there from 3 to 4 to 5 while you were talking about it there is, makes me that kind of reinforces my thinking about that a numerical range doesn't make sense. A hard number range doesn't make sense to me. I think it needs to be about what features came in what versions and what our users are using.
Maybe, excuse me, maybe it would be good to establish a sort of guideline for the minimum amount of support that Rook intends to provide, which could be the latest 3 minor releases, for example.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it comes back to how much effort does it take to support all of those. I'd say there hasn't been much effort, at least that I've noticed, to support 1.8 right now. But what do we officially want to support?
I think kind of going with something like we kind of 100% support like the last 3 Kubernetes versions, and with the other ones kind of do it like with the support for 1.5 and 1.6, where we were like, yeah, you can try using Rook on that, but no guarantee that it's working, kind of, or like with sticks and stones in a way or something, like.
Or use a previous version of Rook that we know was tested on those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what Blaine, I believe it was saying of the minimum number of versions that we support. That sounds reasonable too. I think that when the general principles in this discussion here we can kind of agree upon, but then I think when it comes time to actually remove support for something, that's going to have to be a specific conversation that we'll have in the future. If why would we be removing 1.7? What's driving us to do that? What are we sacrificing, and having a specific conversation around specific versions. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that sounds good.
Okay, cool. Then let's go ahead and move on to, Blaine, this was your topic here. Do you want to go ahead and speak to this?
Yeah, I guess sort of the background to this is that I started kind of deep diving into Rook's code just to get a better idea of where I would make changes when I start working on features. And one of my struggles was just trying to figure out sort of what things were doing what. Like, I can read the code and I can follow it, but having some documentation that talks more high level about what's going on would be really useful. And I think like there are some Go files that I saw that had Godoc style comments above functions or methods or structs or whatever that were helpful in navigating the code. I think that's something that we should consider making part of future editions and future, if a function is sufficiently refactored, to make sure that that thing has some Godocs attached to it, just for the future, for people coming new to the project or coming back to something after a long time.
I think in general, Blaine, that I would definitely be very supportive of that. The general desire to have new contributors or developers come into the code base and be able to kind of understand how things are connected or why things are done by looking at the code itself and the documentation for those functions and such. Like, I definitely believe in that very, very heartily. Steve had done an effort on this. Gosh, that was like months ago, where he included linting as part of the make file, and that enforces having these comments on all exported functions. But there were, I don't know how many hundreds of violations.
At least 700 or 800.
Yeah, that we put that on the back burner, and that has not been made a part of the actual build process. So it's that backlog that prevented us from having automation here around that. That would be nice to get there still. But I personally haven't had the time to sit and document hundreds of functions, unfortunately. So I think that what you're suggesting here, though, Blaine, is more of a kind of a manual thing right now, of including this in like the PR checklist for changes that are being made, to make sure that those are kind of covered in that scope.
Yeah. I definitely realize that what is pre-existing, it would be a pretty huge effort to go and generate Godoc comments for everything that does exist. But making some effort to make sure that things exist for new things and for things that are getting modified a fair bit is, I think, a good way to make a good effort for the future without slowing down too much and doing something that would be a lot of work now.
Yeah, I definitely support that, Blaine. I don't. Other people can chime in if they have strong opinions on that. But otherwise, if we do, or if we're all in agreement on that here, then opening. If you want to go ahead, Blaine, and open a pull request to add that an item there to the PR checklist template that's under the .github folder in the Rook repo, then that would be a welcome PR, unless anybody else disagrees.
That sounds great.
Sounds good. I'll try to get that done tonight or tomorrow early morning. I'm traveling at the moment, so it might be.
Yeah, that's fine. There's no huge rush on that, and we appreciate your recent contributions, Blaine.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and Travis, what happened to you and I, man? We used to be, like, in our C# days, our hardcore style cop, believers. We used to be 100% compliant with all that stuff, and then we switched over to Golang, and we've become lazy slobs.
Well, if something's not enforcing it, it's one of those things that doesn't happen.
Man, I'm just looking at my former self is looking on my current self with disgust.
Too much surfing, I guess.
Hey, now let's say things we can't take back. All right, Travis. So the next item we'll be looking
generate email that doesn't exist.
I like that idea, that thought, Dan. All right, so Travis, your item here.
Yep. So at the last meeting, we talked about potentially closing issues automatically that are stale, and so I found this this bot that we can enable. It's pretty straightforward, has a couple of configuration options, but unless anybody's in disagreement, it sounds like or based on our last discussion, we're ready to go ahead and enable this bot, which basically means after 90 days, issues that haven't been touched, no comments or anything, would be closed. If someone, if there's a need to keep it alive, there's a couple of keywords you can add to the issue, or just comment on it and it'll keep it alive for another 90 days. It also applies to PRs. We can have a different timeout on those if we want. I was thinking maybe 60 days. But otherwise, I think this will just be helpful to help manage our backlog and what do people really care about keeping alive. Not that we want to drop any issues, but and as maintainers, I think we need to review issues that get closed just to make sure they should be closed automatically.
Yeah, I'm in support of all that, Travis. I do have two quick questions though. One is, do you know the behavior of this bot the first time it gets run? Does it automatically close everything right away that hasn't been touched in 90 days without any warnings, or what's the first run experience?
Actually, it gives you a warning, and I believe 7 days grace period to touch the tickets before. Okay,
so a week-long clock starts then.
Yeah.
You can configure that message, by the way, and at least this is a default, it seems, from the repository. Something like, yeah, this issue has been marked as stale, or it has not, recent activity and stuff, and it will be closed in further time, and then it's like, yeah, closing in like 90 days or something, which is also configurable.
Cool. So the first run isn't just like a clean sweep, like knocking out 25% of our issues.
Travis wants to close everything. It's everything.
Well, I know he does, but we got to stay on here, keep him honest here. Okay, that's one question. And then the second question I had, gosh, what was the second question? Shoot. Anybody else have a question? All
right, sound good to everybody then? All right, yeah, let me know if you think of that, Jared.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. And so are you going to follow up with that, Travis, to enable that, or do we want to open up an issue to track it?
I'll open an issue and do that probably in the next few days.
Okay, sounds good. So 0.9 priorities. Let's move that real quick so we sit down here so we can get to the smaller thing first.
Yep.
All right, Alexander, you have some style issues.
Yeah, well, no, I don't have the issues. Travis has the issues. To be honest, put it like that.
You have an issue with Travis's style?
Not directly. He has an issue with my style, or not an issue, but yeah. So basically, Travis and I kind of had it about some changes in my pull request, in one of my pull requests where, like, for example, if there's a space unnecessarily at the end of a line, it will get removed and stuff like that. And that's the first point there, removal of unnecessary spaces. And we kind of agreed that we should, put it up for discussion in the community and then write it down somewhere that we can point people to that, hey, we have certain, like, not checks, but, certain tools that you we can list the settings and stuff where you can enable it, certain things that we want the code to look like. Like just very simple, like style guides. Like, as I said, removal of unnecessary spaces or a new line to the end of a file or something like that is without a problem possible, and so stuff like VS Code, Atom, and even Vim are probably like all editors. It should be available. If not, there's definitely a plugin or something for it.
Yeah, and I think the goal here is to say, if we all use consistent settings in our editors, I mean, some editors don't have them, but the more consistent we are, the fewer white space changes we'll see when somebody else touches code that the first person created.
Yeah, that was, I think I had one PR where it was like just me going like through like most markdown files and to put it like that, pressing save, and with that like having not hundreds, but a good amount of white space changes just because of unnecessary spaces removed at the end of line or something. So
I think in our dev guide it'd be good just to list, hey, here's some VS Code. If you use VS Code, use these settings. If you use another editor, use those settings. I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, this definitely sounds like the type of thing that you can't, 100% enforce, right? So I think your attitude, Travis, of, the more of the key, core contributors or the, people that are making commits, if they have those settings set, then that makes the, less often for, massive corrections to have to be done later on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's
So
all.
yeah, Travis. So yeah, Alexander, if you share what those settings are in the dev guide, then I will update my settings to be in compliance.
Sure.
Travis, are you going to do the same?
Yeah,
We
I already
already
got them.
Oh, you already do. Oh, so I'm the one lagging now.
I just got them yesterday.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's so are we also agreeing on that it's going into which file? Contributing MD, or do we have something like, I don't know, like style.md or something where we can really go like, we use those linters, use those special checks or something
we
before you
have
start?
a developer guide that's underneath a documentation folder.
Yeah, just getting set up as a developer.
Underneath the radar, or
No,
where is it?
Uh, Scroll all the way.
yeah, like here, this
Oh, this one.
development flow
Uh-huh.
guide here. So it talks about like how to create a fork, the development process. Like this would be a perfect place to put it in here, I think.
Sure. Could you? I'll add myself on an action item.
Okay, there you go. Oh, wow. I hear you typing and see it on my screen. That's
Oh.
creepy. Ah.
I like my
Don't,
clicky key.
don't mess up my beautiful document. All right, so let's go ahead and move on then to 0.9. We have 10 minutes or less here. So we have a roadmap, right, that some has some themes that we had already previously declared for 0.9.
Yeah, I thought it'd be good to review that and update it. Right there. Okay.
Yeah, so I think the big one for me is the automatic upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
That one's oh, that's in is 1.0. Oh, I thought that was 0.9. I guess not.
Well, I think I mean, we already established a pattern, even with my PRA now, that we can do it, get a long ways with all the other daemons too
Yeah.
in 0.9. So I think we should move that up to 0.9. It might be 90% automated, but maybe there's still a couple of manual steps we'll have to see as our first goal of automation, right?
Right. And yeah, I think that as a goal in 0.9 is fine, but then the fully automated for sure needs I don't think we can declare version 1 until without that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having it here in the roadmap makes complete sense to me too. Has there been any start on a CSI plugin or any thinking about that for a Ceph specific one?
Not for some time. Waman had started looking at it months ago, and he said he's interested in continuing that. He made that. I was just talking to him a week or two ago, and he said he's planning on it. But yeah, I'd say that's still in Node.9.
Oh, okay. There were some. So let's take a step back. There are some features that were not in 0.8, right? Like this is one I can think of for adding and removing specific disks to the cluster CRD. That one I still think is a valuable feature and want to see in 0.9.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I'm going to start taking notes here. What to move?
Okay.
We can't just update the Google Doc here. Yep. So add, remove disks.
Yeah. So we did all this. The multiple storage providers support that, and we got Mini OEM, we got Cockroach, and we'll have NFS soon too. That Rohan's been working on.
Arbitrary PVs is not done.
Did you write that down?
Yep.
Yeah, all these are done.
These. Yep. Mm-hmm.
This is done. You already wrote that down. We did the stuff on this. I don't know of any really outstanding mon reliability issues still, right?
Right. I think we're okay for now. And placement group, that was delayed till Mimic, I believe.
Oh, Mimic. Oh, okay. All right.
Anybody else on the call recall that for sure? And yep, so Mimic
Yeah, it
support
should be.
there. Yep.
It was announced for like on the CEF Day Germany this year for Mimic, I think. Yeah.
Is that the module that Sage wrote?
I believe so.
Sorry, what's the question? Which version the balancer module was new in?
Yes.
I think Luminous, but let me just check. But it was pretty basic when it was first introduced.
Okay. Maybe it was the next version of it that we were looking for then, because it seems like Luminous wasn't. We were hoping for more than what was in Luminous.
Yeah, I just checked. It was in Luminous, but yeah, you're probably right that you were waiting for it to get better.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm. And then actually, will we get that for free when we go to Mimic, or is there something to orchestrate around that?
Do you need to load the module? Kind of like we do with the Prometheus module and stuff like that?
So I'm sure it's not being loaded right now.
I don't know if there's configuration settings that need to be exposed like through the cluster CRD or something too. Probably some thought needs to be done in that little one pager or something.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just, so the balancer module is in the default value of the manager initial module setting, which means that for a newly created cluster, you'll get the balancer module automatically. But if you upgrade from an older version of Ceph that didn't have it, then you would have to manually enable it. But given that people can potentially change that setting, if you want it enabled, it's good to send the command to the cluster to enable it.
Okay. Great.
Sorry, John, I'm not sure if I fully understood that. So the module, the balancer module, and a brand new Luminous cluster, such like one that Rook would have orchestrated, the balancer module it's present, but it's not enabled.
No, it would be enabled by default on a brand new Luminous cluster.
Oh, so we already have this running then in clusters that Rook is orchestrating? I don't think it would be that.
The module, so I think the balancer module is one of the ones that, in addition to being enabled or disabled, it has modes of operation. So it may be that by default, the module is enabled in the sense that it's running in Ceph Manager and you can send commands to it and things like that. But it might not actually be doing the work of that background balancing by default until somebody sets like, please use the following policy for auto balancing.
I see. Okay, that makes sense to me then, John. Thank you. A big item here that is not captured is some more progress and features with some of the other operators for other storage providers, like CockroachDB. The big one is the secure mode. Right now, it's installed in an insecure mode, so it needs to do some certificate management and stuff like that. So that's a big one. Another one, Travis, I could think of is some of the thinking that had been done on other. What is the right terminology I'm looking for here? Like dynamic provisioning of other types of storage, like buckets was one that Tony had started some design work on. Mm-hmm. Or databases, like, other types of storage besides, block file and object. So that's something of note. I don't know exactly where it's going to fall in the roadmap, but that's something that's not really captured here. I don't know exactly what specific progress would need to be done with Minio. But there's probably stuff there too. Are there any other big things that anyone can think of that just literally are not even in the roadmap right now, but recent discussions justify them being added?
What about Next Center?
I think Caitlin gave us an update last time or 2 times ago. And is Caitlin on right now? No, I don't see Caitlin.
Do you think we get it for 0.9?
I don't know. I think that Caitlin had mentioned that they're in a bit of a holding pattern. I can't remember what the exact reason was. So I don't know if we can commit to adding it to the roadmap right now.
Sure.
But we are here to support Nexenta, as soon as they're ready, for sure.
Sounds good. Okay.
Any other big feature areas that I'm blanking on right now? I'm sure there's a bunch that we've talked about that I'm forgetting right now.
Right.
I have, I guess, an update on running without privileged containers. At least for Ceph, I still think it's a good idea to try to plan for a future where privileged containers aren't necessary. I think the immediate future looks like we will still need to have privileged containers, but the biggest security hole that I see in the containers is having read-write access to /dev. So limiting that to read only access to /dev when when that's absolutely necessary, and otherwise trying to give containers access only to the specific disks they need, like dev SDB, dev SDC, etc. Even if that means sending a slew of just individual disks to a pod, I think that I think that's just, yeah, because if you have write access to /dev, you have write access to the host file system, and that's scary.
There would kind of one problem arise depending on how we do the partitions there. Because if you mount /dev SDB or something, then you would need to, in the end, at the OSD pod, need to mount like SDB1, SDB2, SDBC, free and so on.
Yeah. And I'm not sure 100% how the how the OSDs work. It could be that access to the disk and the disk that has the metadata is sufficient, although giving it only access to the disk and the partition that it needs would be even safer yet.
And that may be something that's more possible now too, Blaine, after the one OSD per pod change, because before an OSD pod would be writing to or mounting multiple disks, so it just took /dev to make that easier. But that might be an easier change now.
Yeah, definitely.
John, you were saying something?
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of other thoughts on that. Some people are interested in being able to do things like blinking the LEDs on their devices. I am not completely familiar with what the wiring is in the OS for doing that, but that would be something to keep in mind if you're clamping down on the access to devices that the containers have, and also things like getting the smart data. So in a scenario where the OSD is, let's say, on an LVM LV, but to get the smart data, it needs to be able to trace back to the underlying physical device and query the smart status on that. I'm a little bit fuzzy on what the right answer to any of this actually is, so that's just a couple of things to bear in mind.
There are definitely some difficulties. I, in a container, was able to get some smart data from one of my disks, but I had to pass some extra parameters. I imagine there will be other places that need read access at least. For like blinking LEDs, there may be another place that needs write access, but even if we give read-only access to /dev and then write access only to specific pieces, I think that's still a good answer. And if we have something like, if we have a situation where blinking LEDs isn't possible immediately, I think those security issues are more important than those LEDs.
Yeah. I'm completely on board with not giving the containers total write access to all devices.
But is this even in scope for an OSD pod? We are talking about one single OSD that, at least from my perspective, should just use the disk for data and not like well, now tell me, not like be used to exit there and do stuff, especially there, explicitly there. The admin needs to go to the machine by SSH or something and do that stuff, or even smart data. You normally in a container world of having one process per container at least, you would have an extra exporter or something running on that node, which is a completely separate pod, or at least a separate container, which then would have different access rights to the disks, to/dev.
Yeah, so we've kind of had that conversation a few times on different platforms when it's come to Ceph. Ideally, we would have external tools that provide all of this device management stuff. The trouble is that depending on whether we're running in Kubernetes or running on a bare metal environment or anywhere else, we usually find that stuff either doesn't exist, or even if it does exist, it would be different, right? So since quite recently, we now have like the code in Ceph for actually marking an OSD out when it has a smart indication of failure. And that wiring is a lot simpler if we get the smart data from the OSDs, and it just works everywhere. So that stuff is going to be in Ceph anyway. So if something like Rook implemented its own disk failure prediction and had hooks to tell Ceph about that, it would end up being a little bit redundant. Although I mean, fundamentally, I agree with you that architecturally it's a little bit of a funny way to do it. This is kind of the result of Ceph supporting lots of different environments.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and wrap up this conversation because we're 5 minutes over time now. We could take the rest of that offline, I think. So Travis, you took a couple notes on the roadmap stuff, and you have a couple of other items on your plate right now. Do you want to just send me that over, and then I can take a stab at updating the roadmap?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's some other Ceph items too that there's potentially multi-site replication. There's CRDs for object store users, potentially integrating Gluster. I've been talking to the Gluster team.
I would love to see that. That would be awesome.
Anyway, there's a few items, not clear if they'd be in 0.9, but yeah, I'll think through that and send it over.
Okay, sounds good. And I could follow up on finalizing the roadmap and getting a PR open and all that stuff. Okay, cool. So then I believe that's was the end of the discussion here, the agenda items here. Sorry for keeping everyone a little bit over today. Is there anything else that needs to be discussed here before we break off?
I have one small thing to mention. I just saw that the Fossa IO check is currently failing. Yeah, I don't see what the problem is because it says like 8 flag projects maintainer access required and 1 unlicensed dependencies maintainer access required, which I can't see that on Fossa, so it would be good if someone takes a look with access to that. As there has at least one issue from a scan from last 4 hours or so, as it says there. So
that's on master?
Yeah, that's master.
Alrighty then, I'll take a look and follow up on that then.
Yep.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Alrighty, I will go ahead and stop the recording now then.